The last day Grace saw Lena alive started like any other, quiet, ordinary, uneventful. They shared coffee in their sunlit kitchen, Lena humming some old tune while flipping through the newspaper. Grace remembered the way Lena looked at her that morning, eyes full of calm, love, and something else, maybe anticipation. They had made plans to go out that weekend, just the two of them, something they hadn't done in a while. Life had been busy. Work, errands, responsibilities. But that morning, time seemed to slow down for just a second. It was the last moment of peace Grace would know for a long, long time. The call came in the afternoon. A police officer, voice gentle but firm, told her there had been an accident. Lena was crossing the street, headed to the florist near her office, when a delivery truck lost control. It all happened so fast. Grace barely heard the rest. Her body collapsed to the floor before the phone even slipped from her hand. Everything after that was a blur, a nightmare where she couldn't wake up. The hospital. The cold, impersonal hallway. The way the nurse avoided eye contact as she led Grace to a small, sterile room where Lena lay covered with a thin white sheet. Grace's scream echoed through the hospital walls. They offered her a grief counselor. She refused. She didn't want to talk to a stranger. She wanted Lena back. Days passed, but Grace didn't feel them. Time had no shape, no meaning. She went through the motions of planning a funeral she never thought she'd have to arrange. Friends tried to help. They brought food, sent flowers, and offered awkward hugs. But none of it reached her. Grace moved like a ghost, floating through her own sorrow. The funeral was held on a rainy Saturday. The gray sky seemed appropriate, almost as if the heavens were mourning too. The church was filled with people, yet it felt empty to her. Grace stood by the casket, trembling, eyes swollen from days without sleep. Lena's family arrived late, dressed in black but showing little emotion. Her sister, Diane, walked in ahead of the others, with her usual cool confidence, lips pursed, eyes dry. Diane gave Grace a short, stiff hug. "You okay?" she asked, the question sounding more obligatory than sincere. Grace could only nod. She wanted to scream, "No, I'm not okay. I've lost the love of my life." But the words stayed trapped inside her. Throughout the service, Diane sat up front, close to the casket, as if she were the grieving widow. Grace tried not to notice. She tried to focus on the eulogy, the soft music, the warm words spoken by Lena's old college friend. But her attention kept drifting to Diane, how she held herself, how she whispered to other family members, how she never once looked at Grace again after that hollow hug. After the funeral, people gathered at Grace and Lena's house. Grace didn't want anyone there, but tradition demanded it. She watched as Lena's cousins filled their home, taking small plates of food, sipping coffee, and murmuring condolences. They wandered around the house like tourists, touching Lena's books, her photos, her favorite vase. Grace stood by the fireplace, clenching her fists. It all felt so wrong. Diane approached her near the end of the gathering. "You shouldn't be alone right now," she said, placing a hand on Grace's arm. Grace flinched slightly but didn't pull away. "I don't mind being alone. I just meant I could stay for a few days. Help you get things sorted. Lena wouldn't want you to go through this by yourself." It was a strange offer. Diane had never been close to her. She and Lena weren't exactly best friends either. Their relationship had always been civil but distant. So why now? Still, Grace was too exhausted to argue. "Okay," she whispered, almost without thinking. She didn't have the strength to push back. Diane moved in that very night. She brought 2 suitcases and her laptop and set up in the guest room. Grace barely noticed. She spent most of her time in bed, clutching one of Lena's old sweaters and staring at the ceiling. But even in her haze of grief, she began to feel something unsettling. Diane was always around. Cooking in the kitchen like she owned the place, answering the door, taking calls in the living room. She even began moving some of Lena's things, just to make the space less painful, she said. Grace wanted to say no, to scream, to tell her to stop touching Lena's belongings. But her voice was weak, her body heavy with sorrow. She caught Diane one morning in Lena's office, sorting through drawers. "What are you doing?" Grace asked. "Just organizing," Diane said smoothly. "There's a lot of paperwork you'll need to deal with soon." It wasn't the answer that bothered her, it was the way Diane said it. As if she were the one in charge now. As if Grace didn't belong in her own home. Still, Grace said nothing. Not yet. Instead, she walked into the bedroom and sat on the floor, clutching a photo of Lena in her wedding dress. They had married on a beach in Oregon, barefoot in the sand, surrounded by laughter and light. Lena's smile in that photo, so bright, so full of life, it pierced through Grace's heart like a blade. She cried until there were no more tears. She didn't yet know the full extent of the betrayal that was coming. She didn't know that Lena's will had been manipulated. That the home she had built with her wife, the life they had poured their hearts into, was about to be threatened. She didn't know that Diane, behind that calm and helpful mask, had her own plans. But in that moment, all Grace knew was pain. And love. A love so deep it still echoed in every corner of the house. In the smell of Lena's shampoo, in the stack of letters by the bedside, in the half-finished novel sitting on the coffee table. Grace closed her eyes and whispered, "I miss you," to the silence. And the silence, for once, seemed to whisper back. The house felt colder after the funeral. Quieter, too, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that pressed on Grace's chest like a weight she couldn't push off. The kind of quiet that echoed with the absence of someone whose presence had once filled every room. Diane was still staying in the guest room. She moved through the house like she belonged there, opening drawers, organizing closets, brewing coffee in the kitchen without asking. Grace, still wrapped in grief, let it happen. At first. Then Diane began to press about the will. "You should really read it," she said one morning, sitting at the dining table with her laptop open. "Lena would have wanted you to." Grace looked up from her cup of untouched tea. Her hands trembled. I'm not ready yet." Diane's expression was unreadable. "It's been a week. There are financial things to sort out. You can't keep putting it off." Reluctantly, Grace agreed to meet with the lawyer Diane recommended. His name was Mr. Corwin, an older man with round glasses and a thick briefcase. He arrived 2 days later and sat up in the living room like he'd done this 100 times before. Diane sat beside Grace on the couch, her knee tapping against Grace's in a rhythm that felt too eager. When Mr. Corwin began to read the will, Grace's world tilted. To Diane Ellis, he read, "I leave all my personal assets, including the house, savings, and possessions. It is my wish that she use these resources to assist Grace Jordan as needed and ensure her well-being." Grace stared at him, unblinking. "I'm sorry, what?" Mr. Corwin adjusted his glasses. "That's what it says. There's also a letter addressed to you, Grace." With trembling fingers, Grace took the envelope he offered. She opened it slowly, the sound of tearing paper deafening in the silence. "My Grace. If you're reading this, then something happened that I never wanted to imagine. I know this must seem confusing and maybe even hurtful, but please believe this decision came from love. I've seen how hard life can be. I didn't want to leave you with debt or legal struggles if something happened to me. Diane promised to help you, to be there in my place, if I couldn't be. Please trust her. I do. I love you forever. Lena." The paper shook in her hands. Her mind reeled. None of it made sense. Lena would never cut her out of something so important. She would never leave her with nothing. Grace folded the letter carefully and set it down beside her. "I want to see the full document," she said quietly. "That was the full document," Mr. Corwin said, his voice calm, measured. Diane reached out to touch Grace's arm, but she pulled away. "It's what Lena wanted," Diane said. "She didn't want you burdened. And I told her I'd take care of you." But her eyes were too sharp, her voice too smooth. Grace suddenly felt sick. That evening, Diane stayed in the kitchen long after dinner, opening a bottle of Lena's favorite wine without asking. She turned on the stereo and played Lena's records, humming along like she lived there. She even moved some of her clothes into the master closet, folding Grace's things neatly to the side. The final straw came when Grace found Diane in Lena's office, boxing up her journals, photo albums, and handwritten letters. "What are you doing?" Grace asked, stepping into the room, heart pounding. "These things are fragile. I'm just putting them away," Diane said, not looking up. "They're not yours to touch." Diane stood up straight, finally meeting her eyes. "Lena left them to me. Technically, everything in this house is mine." Grace felt something inside her snap. The grief burned into anger. "You need to leave." Diane's face darkened. "You're kicking me out? After everything Lena wanted? Lena would never have wanted this. You're not helping me, you're replacing me." There was a long silence, thick with tension. Eventually, Diane left, but not before stuffing several of Lena's personal belongings into her bags, jewelry, a few pieces of art, and one of Lena's old jackets. Grace didn't have the strength to stop her. Not then. For the next few days, Grace wandered the house like a shadow. Every room felt tainted, like Diane had left fingerprints on her grief. She tried to reach out to Lena's other family members, but they were evasive. Distant. Some even acted as if the matter had been settled, as if Grace should just move on and be grateful Diane hadn't kicked her out. Then, one morning, a knock came at the door. She opened it to find a man in a charcoal gray suit holding a leather briefcase. He looked younger than most lawyers Grace had met, with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. "Grace Jordan?" he asked. "Yes. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm a probate attorney. I've come on behalf of your wife, Lena Hammond." Grace frowned. "I already saw the will. That's what I'm here to talk about," he said, stepping inside when she motioned him in. "The will you read was not the most recent version." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" 3 months before Lena's passing, she updated her will through my office. She revoked the previous version and left everything to you, her assets, property, belongings. Everything. She also included a clause to specifically remove Diane Ellis from any claim. Unfortunately, it seems that version was never filed with the family's usual attorney, Mr. Corwin. Grace's hand shook again, but this time, not from grief, from disbelief. "So you're saying Diane lied?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I believe she presented the outdated version and suppressed the new one. But the updated will is legally binding. I have a certified copy and records of the signing. If you'd like, we can begin the process to enforce it." Grace blinked back tears. "Yes. Please. I want to see it." As he laid out the paperwork in front of her, Grace's sorrow began to shift. The weight on her chest didn't disappear, but a different feeling began to grow beneath it, resolve. She had been lied to, taken advantage of in the middle of her grief. But not anymore. Lena had trusted her. Lena had chosen her. And now, Grace was ready to fight for what was rightfully hers. The soft rustle of paper filled the living room as Nolan Reyes, the second attorney, laid the documents across Grace's coffee table. The light from the nearby window poured across the old wood surface, catching the seal at the bottom of the legal form, the one that now carried everything Grace had feared and hoped for. "This," Nolan said, tapping the final page, "is the true, most recent will of Lena Hammond. It was notarized and filed through my office 2 months before her death." Grace stared down at the neat rows of printed text. Her name appeared multiple times: Grace Jordan, sole beneficiary. To receive all assets, real estate, personal belongings. With the exception of donations listed under Section 3. "It's real?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't trust her own hope yet. "As real as it gets," Nolan replied, his voice steady but kind. "Lena came to me in private. She didn't want to involve her family, she was worried about them contesting her decisions, especially her sister." Grace's fingers brushed over the paper as if she were afraid it might vanish. "Why didn't she tell me?" she murmured. "Why keep it secret?" Nolan leaned back slightly, folding his hands. "She left you a letter. Would you like to read it?" Grace nodded. He handed her a smaller envelope, yellowed only slightly by time, with her name written in Lena's familiar, looping handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. _ My Grace. If you're holding this letter, then I didn't make it back to you. I hate even imagining that. But if that's the case, I need you to know something important. I changed my will because I needed to protect you, not from financial problems, but from my own family. You always saw the good in people, especially Diane, and I know she can be convincing. But I've watched her twist things, guilt people, manipulate. I didn't trust her with your future. I didn't tell you about the change because I didn't want it to become a burden. I wanted us to live, love, and dream together, without fear, without legal documents hanging over our heads. I left everything to you because it's yours already. You were my home. Always. I hope this letter reaches you. And I hope you fight for what's yours, even if it's hard. You are so much stronger than you think. Forever. Lena. _ Tears slid down Grace's cheeks before she even finished the last line. Her chest ached, not just with grief this time, but with a deep, raw love that lived on through Lena's words. She folded the letter and held it to her heart. It was the first moment since the funeral that Grace felt Lena's presence again, strong, protective, and fiercely loyal. She knew, Grace said softly. She knew Diane would do something like this. She tried to stay ahead of it, Nolan replied. She even had me store the signed will in a separate location, somewhere Diane would never think to look. We've filed the correct documents now, and we've begun a legal process to invalidate the outdated one. Grace looked up. How long will it take? A few weeks, he answered. But you don't need to wait to take back what's yours. Once the court verifies this will, you'll be granted full legal rights to everything Lena owned. Grace nodded slowly. Relief mixed with an unfamiliar sense of empowerment. For weeks, she'd felt like a ghost in her own home, haunted not only by loss but by betrayal. Now, that fog began to lift. But it wasn't so simple. A new feeling rose in her, uncertainty. Can I ask you something, Mr. Reyes? Of course. Let's say I didn't want to fight. Let's say I didn't challenge Diane or take anything back. What would happen? He tilted his head slightly. Well, Diane wouldn't have a legal claim anymore. But if you chose not to assert your rights, and she refused to return property voluntarily, she could hold on to things she doesn't legally own. So I'd be letting her steal it, essentially. In essence, yes, he said. But it's your choice. Some people prefer peace over conflict. Grace sighed and stood up, walking slowly to the fireplace mantel. A photo of her and Lena sat there, taken in the spring 2 years ago on a hiking trip. Lena's head rested on Grace's shoulder, eyes squinting from sunlight, both of them laughing. Diane hadn't just tried to take the house or the possessions. She tried to rewrite Lena's legacy. To erase Grace from it. That was something she couldn't allow. I don't want to fight her just for revenge, Grace said quietly, still looking at the photo. I want to honor Lena. And I think the best way to do that is to make sure her voice is the one that matters. That's exactly the kind of thinking she hoped you'd have, Nolan replied. Grace turned back toward him. So what now? I'll file the proper notice. Once the judge certifies the new will, we'll serve Diane with a legal request to return all property she removed and vacate any claims she's made. You won't have to contact her directly if you don't want to. Good, Grace said, her voice firm for the first time in weeks. I don't. As Nolan packed up his papers and prepared to leave, he paused at the door. For what it's worth, Grace, I've seen a lot of families torn apart over wills. But this one? This was a love story. And Lena did everything she could to protect it. Grace managed a small smile. Thank you. That means more than you know. After he left, the house still felt quiet. But not empty. Not anymore. For the first time since Lena died, Grace felt something steady inside her, a sense of purpose, of clarity. She knew there would be backlash once Diane found out. Anger, accusations, maybe even threats. But Grace was done letting other people decide what she was allowed to feel or claim. Lena had trusted her with a life. A home. A future. Now, it was time to reclaim it. Grace stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the sleeves of her navy blue sweater. It was simple, but she'd chosen it with care, something Lena once said made her look unshakable. Today, she needed that more than ever. Across the room, a slim folder lay on the table. Inside was the real will, notarized and filed. Alongside it, a copy of Lena's handwritten letter, and a legal notice drafted by Nolan Reyes. All of it was ready. The question was Grace? For weeks, she had felt like the world was closing in on her. But now, with the truth in her hands, she felt the tide turning. She wasn't doing this out of revenge. She was doing it for Lena. For herself. Nolan arrived just before noon, dressed in a charcoal suit and carrying a briefcase. His calm presence grounded her. You don't have to say much, he reminded her gently. I'll handle the legal part. But it might help if she sees that you're not afraid of her. I'm not, Grace said, voice firm. Not anymore. Diane's condo sat at the edge of town, a cold, sterile building with chrome railings and gray brick walls. Fitting, Grace thought, as they took the elevator up to the third floor. Diane opened the door wearing designer loungewear and a smirk. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Grace, and narrowed further when she noticed Nolan behind her. Oh, just look who it is, she said flatly. Come to apologize? Not quite, Grace replied, stepping past her into the living room. Diane's home was filled with Lena's belongings. A ceramic vase they bought together in Portugal now sat on the coffee table. One of Lena's paintings, a soft, abstract canvas in lavender and gold, hung on the wall. Grace's heart twisted. Nolan remained professional. Ms. Morrison, I'm here on behalf of my client, Grace Jordan. We've come to serve notice regarding the will of Lena Hammond. Diane scoffed. That old thing again? I already saw the will. Lena left everything to me. She said Grace was too emotional to handle things. Grace inhaled slowly, steadying herself. That was an outdated version, Nolan said calmly. My office holds a more recent, legally binding will. It names Grace as the sole beneficiary of Lena's estate. He opened the folder and placed a copy of the will on the coffee table. Diane stared at it, her smirk faltering. This is a joke, she snapped. You forged this. There's no way Lena changed it without telling me. She didn't tell you because she didn't trust you, Grace said quietly, stepping forward. She knew you'd try to twist things. And she was right. Diane's eyes flashed with rage. Oh, give me a break. You think Lena would cut me out entirely? We were a family. She was my wife, Grace replied, her voice trembling but strong. And she didn't want her memory disrespected by manipulation or greed. This was her final decision. And it's legal. Nolan added, if you refuse to return the property you've taken and cease all claims to the estate, we'll file a formal suit. You'll be held accountable for theft and fraud, and you'll be subpoenaed to court. Diane's expression twisted into something between panic and fury. I can't believe this. After everything I did for her, after I helped you at the funeral, this is how you thank me? You didn't help me, Grace said, her voice growing firmer. You moved into my home without asking. You took Lena's things. You acted like you owned everything. And the moment I needed time to breathe, you pushed a lie in front of me. For the first time since Lena's death, Grace felt like she was standing on solid ground. Diane snatched the papers from the table and flipped through them with frantic hands. This means nothing. You probably got some backroom notary to stamp it. Nolan sighed. This has already been filed with the probate court. The judge will recognize this version as the legal will. You can hire a lawyer if you'd like to contest it, but it won't change the facts. Diane looked at Grace, her voice shrill. You think this makes you better than me? Lena would have hated this. Grace took a step forward. No. Lena would have hated that we're even in this situation. But she tried to protect me from exactly this. I won't let you twist her legacy to suit yourself. There was a pause. The room, for a moment, fell into silence. Diane's confidence began to crumble. What do you want? She asked finally. I want you to return everything that belongs to me, and to Lena, Grace replied. You can keep whatever personal items she left you in her original letter, if any. But the rest? It comes back. Today. Nolan added, we'll arrange a pickup for the larger items and file a full inventory. If anything is missing, we'll take appropriate legal steps. Diane sat down hard on the couch, her eyes flicking between Grace and Nolan. Her pride was clearly fighting her reality, but the law, this time, wasn't on her side. I'll have it packed, she muttered. Thank you, Grace said quietly. As she and Nolan walked back to the elevator, Grace felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her was still shaking from the confrontation, but deeper down, she felt proud. Not vindictive. Not victorious. Just proud. Proud of herself for standing up. Proud of honoring Lena's wishes. Proud of no longer being silent in the face of injustice. When they stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air, Nolan glanced over at her. You handled that perfectly. I didn't know if I could, Grace admitted. But I just kept thinking about what Lena would want me to do. She'd be proud too, Nolan said. Grace nodded, a soft smile forming at the corners of her mouth. The road ahead might still hold court filings and hard conversations, but she wasn't afraid anymore. Because now, she knew the truth. And she was ready to defend it. The house felt different now. Not quieter, Grace had long grown used to the silence, but warmer somehow, like it was finally breathing again. For weeks after reclaiming her rightful place in Lena's home, Grace had lived in a sort of limbo. The legal dust had settled, Diane had returned everything she'd taken, and the matter had been closed without the need for court. But internally, Grace knew that a different kind of healing still needed to happen. She walked through the living room one morning, her hand trailing across the back of the sofa, pausing on the corner where Lena used to sit and read. The sunlight filtering in through the sheer curtains made the dust dance like tiny spirits in the air. For the first time in months, Grace didn't feel haunted, she felt held. The painting Lena made, the one Diane had tried to hang in her sterile condo, now sat above the fireplace again. Grace had placed fresh lavender beneath it, Lena's favorite scent. The kitchen, once cold and unused, now smelled of cinnamon and coffee every morning. Slowly, carefully, Grace was reclaiming not just the house, but herself. She started small. She replaced the bedroom curtains, choosing ones that let in more light. She repainted the hallway a soft blue, The color Lena once said reminded her of the ocean on cloudy days. And one day, on a whim, she cleared out the guest room and turned it into an art studio, not to paint like Lena, but to honor her, to surround herself with color and memory and light. The grief didn't disappear, but it changed. It stopped being sharp and cruel and instead became something quieter. A companion, not a wound. Grace began writing letters to Lena. Not to send anywhere, but to speak the words she still held in her heart. "Today I fixed the squeaky window you always hated," she'd write. "I think you'd like the new pillows. I made apple pie with your recipe and nearly set off the smoke alarm, but it turned out okay." These letters became part of her healing. They helped her laugh again. And crying didn't feel like breaking anymore, it felt like remembering. In the months that followed, Grace reconnected with friends she had unintentionally pushed away during the chaos. Her best friend, Lily, stopped by with fresh-baked muffins and an open heart. They spent hours catching up on the couch, talking about everything and nothing. "You look lighter," Lily said one afternoon, sipping tea. Grace smiled. "I think I finally feel like I can breathe again." One day, as she walked through the neighborhood park Lena used to love, Grace saw a flyer pinned to the community board, "Volunteers needed, art therapy for children." Something stirred in her. The next week, Grace found herself in a room filled with children splattering paint on canvases and giggling uncontrollably. At first, she wasn't sure what she could offer. But she realized quickly it wasn't about painting perfectly, it was about creating space for joy, just like Lena used to do for her. She started volunteering every Saturday, guiding kids as they painted their dreams, their fears, their favorite animals. Every smile, every mess of color, felt like a whisper from Lena. It was exactly where Grace needed to be. "I do this in her name," she told the program coordinator once. "She made art feel like magic. I want to pass that on." One rainy Sunday, Grace finally opened the last envelope. It had been tucked inside a drawer in Nolan Reyes' office, labeled simply, "For Grace, final letter." Nolan had given it to her weeks ago, urging her to open it when she was ready. She wasn't sure if she ever would be ready. But something about the storm outside, the steady rhythm of rain tapping the windows, the way the world felt paused, made it feel like the right moment. Grace sat on the living room floor, legs crossed beneath her, and unfolded the letter. "My Grace," it began in Lena's familiar, looping handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm no longer beside you, but I am still with you. In the way the morning sun lights up the kitchen, in the smell of lavender, in the pages of your favorite book. I know you're hurting. I know you feel like everything fell apart. But love doesn't end. It transforms." Grace blinked, and the tears came without warning. She pressed her fingers to her lips, trying to breathe. "I did everything I could to protect you, even from those I once called family. I'm sorry you had to carry that pain. But I believe in your strength. You always underestimated yourself. I saw the fire in you, even when you couldn't. Don't let my absence stop you from living. Paint. Dance in the living room. Laugh too loud. Cry when you need to. And when the days feel dark, remember, you were always my home. Love. Lena." Grace held the letter against her chest, sobbing, not out of sorrow this time, but from the sheer beauty of being known, of being loved so completely. She stayed like that for a long time, letting the storm outside mirror the quiet storm within her. But when she finally stood up, it was with a steadiness she hadn't felt in months. Spring arrived early that year. The garden, which had withered under Diane's neglect and Grace's grief, slowly began to bloom again. Grace planted new flowers, sunflowers, daisies, and climbing roses that Lena always said made the fence look like a fairy tale. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon and the sky glowed pink and gold, Grace stood at the porch, sipping tea and listening to the wind rustle through the trees. She felt peace. It didn't mean the pain was gone. It meant the pain had a place. It no longer swallowed her whole. It reminded her that what she had with Lena was real, and beautiful, and worth carrying forward. As a new day began to unfold, Grace whispered softly into the wind, "Thank you, Lena." And then, with her head held high, Grace turned back into the home they had built together, still grieving, still healing, but finally ready to live again.